There is a word for when something is described as one thing, but is actually its exact opposite: irony. And on May 9th, 2026, the Russia-Ukraine war produced one of the most perfect pieces of irony in modern political history. Vladimir Putin stood in Red Square and declared victory was coming. He said Russia's cause was just. He said his soldiers were heroes. He said Russia could not be stopped. And across the border, in the country Russia has been trying to defeat for 4 years, Volodymyr Zelenskyy did something that no general, no missile, no sanction had managed to do. He made Vladimir Putin look small. Not with a weapon, not with a threat, with a permission slip. A formal presidential decree, a real, official, legal Ukrainian government document that announced Ukraine was granting Russia permission to hold its Victory Day parade. That informed Russia, in the language of government and diplomacy, that Red Square would be removed from Ukraine's list of operational targets for the duration of the event. GPS coordinates included, just to be helpful. Putin declared victory. Zelensky gave him permission to celebrate, and the world has been trying to process it ever since. This is that story, the full story, every layer of it. And by the time we're done, you will understand not just what happened, but what it means. For the war, for both leaders, for the question of how this conflict eventually ends. Let's begin. Part 1. To understand the irony, you must understand the history. May 9, 1945. Nazi Germany surrendered to the Soviet Union. World War II in Europe ended, and for the Soviet people, who had lost between 27 and 40 million souls in that war, who had survived sieges and starvations and atrocities on a scale the Western world struggled to comprehend, that day was not just a military victory. It was a resurrection. The Great Patriotic War, as Russia calls it, left a wound in the Russian national psyche that is never fully healed. There is no Russian family untouched by that loss, no Russian city that doesn't carry the memory, no Russian generation that wasn't shaped in some way by the sacrifice of 1941 to 1945. Vladimir Putin understood this with an almost forensic precision. When he came to power at the turn of the millennium, Russia was a country still dazed by the collapse of the Soviet Union, a superpower that had ceased to exist, whose pride had been shattered, whose identity was uncertain. Putin saw Victory Day as the key to national reconstruction. Starting in 2008, he brought back the full military spectacle that had defined Soviet-era parades. Tanks rolling through Red Square, intercontinental ballistic missiles on display, thousands of soldiers in perfect formation, fighter jets painting the Russian tricolor in smoke across the Moscow sky. He invited Xi Jinping. He invited dozens of world leaders. He made Victory Day an international event, a display not just of Russian pride, but of Russian power on the global stage. The message year after year was clear. We were the country that defeated Hitler. We are still a great power. We cannot be defeated. And then in February 2022, he invaded Ukraine, a country that also lost millions in that same war, a country that also has Victory Day in its history, because Ukrainians fought and died in exactly the same battles that Russians celebrate every May 9th. And in doing so, Putin unleashed a 4-year contradiction that could not be resolved by speech or parade or proclamation. How do you celebrate defeating one invader while being one yourself? Part 2. The parade as political theater and what changed. For 4 years, Putin has used Victory Day to draw a line from 1945 to 2022. His argument, repeated every year on every May 9th, goes like this. Russia defeated the Nazis in World War II. Ukraine, in his telling, is controlled by neo-Nazis. Therefore, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not aggression. It is the same righteous struggle. Russia is the liberator. Russia is the hero. Russia is doing in 2022 what it did in 1945. Most of the world finds this argument offensive, historically inaccurate, and morally bankrupt. Ukraine's president is Jewish. His grandfather fought the Nazis. The idea that Ukraine is run by Nazis is a propaganda construct that virtually no credible historian or independent analyst accepts. But inside Russia, the argument has power. Because it connects the war, unpopular with many Russians who have watched their sons and brothers come home in body bags, to something sacred, something that cannot be questioned or criticized. For 4 years, the parade was the theatrical expression of that argument. And then came May 9th, 2026, the 81st anniversary of the Soviet victory, and the parade looked like this. No tanks, no missiles, no heavy military hardware. For the first time in nearly 20 years, the first time since Putin personally restored the military spectacle in 2008, there were no weapons rolling through Red Square. Instead, videos on giant screens. Pre-recorded footage of tanks and equipment filmed at the front lines, shown on screens because the real hardware couldn't be brought back. It was all in Ukraine. The parade lasted 45 minutes. Russia's defense ministry cited the current operational situation. Al Jazeera's correspondent on the ground in Moscow was blunt. The tanks are needed at the front, not at the parade. Putin stood at the podium and said, "Victory has always been and will be ours." But behind him, where the tanks used to roll, there were screens, showing videos of tanks that were somewhere else. The symbol of Russian power, the image Putin had spent 18 years constructing, had been hollowed out. Not by enemy fire, not by sanctions, by the simple, grinding reality of a war that has consumed Russia's military resources more thoroughly than anyone publicly admitted. Part 3. The week that made it worse. Before we get to Zelensky's decree, let's understand how the week leading up to May 9th made everything more humiliating for Moscow. Russia announced a unilateral ceasefire for May 8th and 9th. Their stated reason? Victory Day. Their actual reason, understood by everyone paying attention, was the very real fear that Ukraine would launch drone strikes on Moscow during the parade. Because here is a fact that would have been unthinkable in February 2022. Ukraine has drones that can fly over 1,000 kilometers into Russian territory. Ukraine has struck Russian oil refineries, military depots, ammunition factories, and power infrastructure deep inside Russia. It has demonstrated repeatedly that no part of Russia is beyond reach, including Moscow. Russia shut down mobile internet and messaging services across Moscow ahead of the parade, trying to prevent communication that could coordinate drone attacks. Police boats patrolled the Moskva River. Anti-drone systems were positioned on rooftops. The Kremlin announced additional security measures to protect Putin personally. The most powerful military in Europe, on paper, was protecting its president from a country it was supposed to have defeated in 72 hours. Let that sink in. Then, to make things even more complicated, Trump stepped in. On May 8th, he brokered a 3-day ceasefire, May 9th through 11th, with a prisoner swap of 1,000 soldiers from each side. Both Putin and Zelensky confirmed the deal, and then Zelensky did the thing. Part 4. The permission slip. Every layer explained. Presidential Declaration 374. Let's go through this document carefully, because every word of it is loaded. The decree opened with the phrase, "taking into account numerous requests." Numerous requests. This is Zelensky noting with perfect comic timing that multiple parties had apparently been asking Ukraine not to attack Russia's capital during the parade. Numerous people, presumably including the Kremlin, which had been panicking about drone strikes for days. Zelensky acknowledged these numerous requests. He considered them, and he determined that graciously Ukraine would permit the parade to proceed. The decree then specified that for the duration of the parade, beginning at 10 a.m. Kiev time on May 9th, the territorial area of Red Square would be excluded from the operational plan for the use of Ukrainian weapons. And then the GPS coordinates, latitude and longitude of Red Square. The effect of this document as a piece of political communication is extraordinary for several reasons. First, it is undeniably real. This is not a tweet, not a press statement, not a casual remark that can be walked back. It is an official government document published on the Ukrainian presidential website bearing the signature of the president and the authority of the Ukrainian state. It has the same legal weight as any other presidential decree. Second, it establishes targeting reach. The decree's entire premise is that Ukraine has the capability to strike Red Square. By formally excluding it from the target plan, Zelensky is officially confirming that Red Square is, under normal circumstances, within the operational plan. Ukraine can reach it. Ukraine chooses not to, for now. Third, it inverts the power dynamic. For 4 years, Russia has been the aggressor. Russia has been the one with the missiles. Russia has been the one deciding where and when to strike. This decree, quietly, officially, on government letterhead, reverses that dynamic. It says, Ukraine makes decisions about where it strikes, including in Moscow, including on Russia's most sacred holiday. Fourth, the GPS coordinates are a masterstroke. They specify precisely which 70 by 330 meter area is protected. Everything outside those coordinates, the rest of Moscow, the rest of Russia, remains on the target plan. The decree is simultaneously a ceasefire assurance and a threat, simultaneously mercy and menace. The Kiev Independent described it perfectly. Declaration 374 unmasked Putin and upstaged Trump. It is not just a joke, but a succinct threat. The decree makes no promises about the safety of territory beyond the precise boundaries of the square. Part 5. The Kremlin's impossible response. Dmitry Peskov, Russia's presidential spokesman, has spent years delivering impossible statements with a straight face. He is very good at it. But May 8, 2026 may have been his most difficult day, because there is no good response to Presidential Declaration 374. If you ignore it, the world concludes that Zelensky's implied capability is real, and that Russia is choosing to let the mockery stand. If you dismiss it as a joke, you have to explain why Russia shut down Moscow's internet, deployed extra security, and restricted communications due to the threat of Ukrainian drone strikes. Peskov's silly joke explanation collapsed under the weight of Russia's own precautionary measures. If you respond angrily, you legitimize it. You confirm that it landed. You give it more attention and more credibility than ignoring it would have. Peskov chose the dismissal route. We don't need anyone's permission to be proud of our victory day. And in doing so, he did the one thing he shouldn't have. He responded. He made it official Russian government business. He gave it the status of something that required a Kremlin response, which means the Kremlin felt it. The world noticed. Part 6. The parade Zelensky watched, and what he saw. While Putin was speaking at the parade, invoking the memory of the Soviet sacrifice, declaring that victory was coming, saying Russia's cause was just, Zelensky was in Kiev. And he watched a parade that told a very different story than Putin's words. He saw a 45-minute ceremony with no tanks, no missiles, no military hardware. He saw screens showing videos of equipment that was stuck at the front. He saw a handful of foreign leaders, far fewer than last year, far fewer than the years before. He saw North Korean soldiers marching alongside Russian ones, a detail that speaks to how Russia's isolation has grown. He saw a leader who had promised a quick victory standing before evidence of a prolonged, costly, inconclusive war. And Zelensky had already responded to all of it, not with a speech, not with criticism, with a permission slip that the entire world had read and shared and discussed. Putin declared victory was coming. Zelensky had already said in an official government document, "You needed our permission to hold your celebration." The contrast between those two facts is the story of this war in miniature. Part 7. The 1,000 prisoners, the moral core. Behind the irony, behind the theater, behind the political maneuvering, there are real people. 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers agreed to be exchanged as part of the Trump-brokered deal. These are not abstractions. They are people who have been in Russian captivity, some for months, some for years. Human rights organizations have documented the conditions in those camps. The accounts are harrowing. Families who have spent years without knowing if their children are alive. Zelensky's statement, made alongside the decree, was simple. Red Square matters less to us than the lives of Ukrainian prisoners of war who can be brought home. This sentence is the moral heart of the entire week. Zelensky had the capability to strike, he had reasons, he had justification, and he had the documents proving it. He chose people instead. 1,000 people coming home. That choice, made quietly, expressed formally in a government document, overshadowed by the humor of the permission slip, represents something profound about the Ukrainian approach to this war. Ukraine has been fighting for 4 years not just for territory, not just for sovereignty, not just for the abstract principles of international law. It has been fighting for its people. And in choosing 1,000 prisoners over a symbolic military strike, Zelensky demonstrated, in the most concrete way possible, that he means exactly that. Part 8. What victory actually looks like. Putin said at the parade, "Victory has always been and will be ours." Let's examine that statement against the facts. 4 years ago, Russia expected to capture Kyiv in 72 hours. Kyiv has not fallen. It has not even been close to falling. Zelensky is still there, still governing, still signing presidential decrees that go viral around the world. Russia has advanced in eastern Ukraine, but at a pace that military analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies describe as slower than the most brutal offensive campaigns over the last century. 70 meters per day, for years. Russia's economy is under pressure from sanctions, high interest rates, and the costs of sustaining a full-scale war. Internet restrictions have become a daily reality for ordinary Russians. Young men are being mobilized. Families are grieving. Russia has lost so many tanks and vehicles in Ukraine that it cannot display military hardware at its most important annual parade. It is showing videos instead. Russia's alliance network has narrowed to the point where North Korean soldiers are marching in Victory Day formation in Moscow. This is not what victory looks like. And yet Putin stands before his people and says victory is coming. He has been saying this for 4 years. Meanwhile, the country he invaded, the country that was supposed to collapse in 3 days, is writing official government documents that tell him where he can hold his parade. Victory is a word. A permission slip from Kyiv is a fact. Part 9. The bigger picture. What this moment means for the war. Zoom out. Look at the full picture. In February 2022, the story was, Russia invades Ukraine. Ukraine will fall. The world watches. In May 2026, the story is, Ukraine gives Russia permission to hold its parade. Putin shows up with videos instead of tanks. Trump brokers a 72-hour ceasefire that doesn't fully hold. The war enters its 5th year with no peace deal in sight. The shift between those two stories is not accidental. It is the product of 4 years of Ukrainian resistance, Western support, and Russian overconfidence. It is the product of Ukrainian innovation in drone warfare, Ukrainian intelligence operations, Ukrainian civilian endurance under bombardment. And it is, in some small but real way, the product of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, a comedian-turned-president who understands that war is not only fought with weapons, it is fought with symbols, with narratives, with the stories that people tell about themselves and their enemies. Russia built its narrative on Victory Day, on the memory of 1945, on the image of tanks rolling through Red Square. Zelensky took that narrative, he picked it up, he examined it, and with a single official document and a set of GPS coordinates, he turned it inside out. Putin declared victory. Zelensky gave him permission to celebrate. And in that gap, between what Putin declared and what Zelensky permitted, is the entire truth of this war. A final thought. History has a long memory. When this war is eventually over, and it will be over, someday, somehow, people will remember the battles, the cities destroyed, the lives lost, the political decisions and military campaigns that shaped the outcome, but they will also remember smaller moments, human moments, moments that captured something true about the people involved and the conflict they were caught in. They will remember the Ukrainian soldiers on Snake Island. They will remember Zelensky staying in Kyiv when he could have left. And they will remember Presidential Declaration 374. The document that said, in the language of governments and laws and official seals, Ukraine knows where Red Square is. Ukraine has it on the target list. Ukraine is choosing today not to strike it. You're welcome. Putin declared victory. Zelensky gave him permission to celebrate. And in that exchange, more than in any battlefield report, any diplomatic cable, any speech from any podium, the state of this war was captured perfectly, 4 years in, and the man in Kiev is still writing the permission slips.